So in this video, we are going to cover the topic of trauma bonding as a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And we're going to talk about which attachment styles are most often the magnet for trauma bonds and the root reasons why. And if you stick around to the end, we will also talk about what to do. So first and foremost, if you were not already familiar with what a trauma bond essentially is, a trauma bond is basically a psychological phenomenon where a person forms this strong emotional connection with somebody who is unhealthy for them. And, this is the definition from the American Psychological Association, but I think there's a nuanced, really important thing to pay attention to. At the APA's definition, it says emotional connection. Well, I believe emotional connection to be where there's mutual support, mutual respect, care, vulnerability, acceptance of each other, depth. I think trauma bonding is more about emotional attachment rather than emotional connection. So, emotional attachment would be that we actually have some kind of emotional addiction to somebody to a certain degree. And what we'll often find is that individuals get into trauma bonds with people who are unhealthy because they actually have a subconscious comfort zone around this, which leads to an emotional attachment. Now, if you didn't already know this, there are three major things that actually create attraction at the subconscious level. And the first thing is if somebody expresses your repressed traits. So, in other words, if it's called trait variety, right? It's a biological phenomenon. So if you think of, two people pairing up, you know, many years ago, one person's really smart, one person's really strong, they pair up together, they're more likely to survive together, right? If they're out in the wild trying to figure things out. So we're actually wired to a certain degree to be attracted to people who sort of express opposing traits. But that's not the only phenomenon about attraction. The second major component is if somebody meets your deeply unmet needs. So, for example, if you as a child felt deeply unseen and like you didn't have anybody present with you in your family household, as an adult, if you meet somebody who's really present and makes you feel really seen, you may really latch onto this. You might be like, oh my gosh, I've been hungering for this for so long. And it may create this really deep imprint. But the third and actually most prevailing form of what creates attraction is if somebody represents a subconscious comfort zone. In other words, if the way you were treated in childhood and the way that sort of fostered the relationship you have to yourself, if somebody else that you meet represents that and treats you in a similar way, because our subconscious is ultimately survival wired, it will actually want to invest in people who mirror that back to you. In other words, if you grew up with a caregiver who was very dismissive, let's say, then you may have learned to sort of dismiss your own needs and boundaries and emotions. And you may actually be attracted to other people who are also going to dismiss your needs and boundaries and emotions because it's a subconscious comfort zone. So even though it's painful, your subconscious will say, well, it's painful, but we survived this whole time. So this works. So let's invest in it. And so it really brings up this dynamic of like why we get into trauma bonds to begin with has so much to do with what our subconscious comfort zone is. So when you look at who's a magnet for trauma bonds, generally it's pretty obvious that fearful avoidant attachment styles and anxious preoccupied are both magnets for trauma bonds. But we're going to talk about the dismissive avoidant part of this in a moment. And this is usually because both of them violate their own boundaries all the time, minimize their own feelings in favor of others' needs and feelings and boundaries. And they can both be very critical to themselves in their internal dialogue. So what's essentially going to happen is somebody's going to come along who may be really unhealthy, let's say, a narcissist, for example, and they may be really critical, violate their boundaries, dismiss their emotions, and the alarm bells won't go off for the FA and AP because this is part of the relationship they have to themselves. This is part of what they might have been parented around in various degrees. So you'll see that this is, why they're a magnet for trauma bonds. But the dismissive avoidant, and this is one of the most interesting parts, is that dismissive avoidance can absolutely be a magnet for trauma bonds as well. The big reason being that they're deeply out of touch with their own subconscious emotions. Now, here's why this matters. If you grew up in a household where you were neglected, you experienced childhood emotional neglect, which is obviously the case for dismissive avoidance. As an adult, dismissive avoidants become the greatest neglectors of their own emotions, right? They don't know how to actually process and experience their own emotions. And as a result of that, they are numb. And I think something that's so important to recognize is that part of how we get the alarm bells is because we feel really pained by things. If somebody comes in and they totally dismiss your perspective. They neglect your emotions. They're rude. They're harsh. They don't care about how they make you feel. But you can't really feel how you're feeling because you're so repressed in that area, then you may put up with so much more than what's actually healthy or appropriate for you as a dismissive avoidant because your feelings are not turned on. You're so used to repressing your feelings and not even allowing that information to make it all the way up to the conscious level of mind. And so if you are in a position where you repress your feelings so much and disconnect from yourself, then you are going to also disconnect from how other people make you feel. And that can actually be a dangerous slippery slope. And I think this sort of myth is that it's just FAs and APs that end up in trauma bonded relationships. But actually, dismissive avoidants end up in trauma bonded relationships with people, for example, like a narcissist all the time. And it's quite frequent because they are so disconnected from how they're feeling. And so they're also not getting those alarm bells going off. And if you look at this idea of profound neglect, right? If somebody's in such a neglectful space, they can also be drawn into other people who will also neglect how they are making the dismissive avoidant feel. Now, if you want to do a much deeper dive into trauma bonding and healing, I'll give you a couple quick steps, but I also have a course you can check out for free for 14 days using the link in the description box below. And this course will actually give you access to, or the link will give you access to a course called Overcoming Trauma Bonding and Narcissistic Relationships. And we'll talk about how to really like get out of that dynamic, heal, take action, also identify if you're in a trauma bonded relationship or just a relationship that's kind of in a rocky place, and some action steps you can take to really break free and truly heal at the subconscious level. Now, a couple things that are going to be really important if you're out of a trauma bonded relationship and you want to do the healing is number one, you need to find the core wounds this person left. Often, trauma bonded relationships make you feel abandoned, betrayed, unloved, unseen, or like you don't matter, trapped, helpless, powerless. And these are all concepts that we'll actually carry with ourselves at a subconscious level until we do reprogramming. I have other videos about reprogramming on this channel. I'm not going to go into it now. We also have a course that you can still access for free in the link called 21 Ways to Reprogram the Subconscious Mind with 21 different tools. But we can reprogram these things that somebody has left. And that's a really important dynamic. We are also going to have to do nervous system regulation work after a trauma bonded relationship because being in proximity with somebody who is creating trauma in your life on a regular basis, unfortunately, is going to make you be in this exacerbated state of fight or flight. And we have to take up different techniques like meditation or mindfulness or body scans or even doing breath work so that we can get ourselves out of this exaggerated fight or flight state that we may have been in for so long and back into a rooted, grounded state, feeling safe to be in our body. Another thing, you'll have to relearn your boundaries after a trauma bonded relationship because chances are if you try to set boundaries, you felt like it was kind of unsafe to do so. So that's going to be really important work. And last but not least, you have to learn who you are and how to meet your needs. So what your needs are, what matters to you, because coming out of a trauma bonded relationship is often an identity crisis because somebody in a trauma bonded relationship, the person who's sort of responsible for instilling more of the trauma into the dynamic usually is so good at making sure that you don't even know how to think without this person. They're so good at, taking up so much real estate in your mind every day, about if they're going to be angry or upset or happy or in a good mood or how they're going to act or how they're going to speak to you, that it can just be so much focus in that area that we lose our sense of self and identity. So it's going to be really important to relearn who you are, what's meaningful to you, what lights you up, what makes you happy, what your needs are, all of these sort of introspective questions so that you can rebuild that sense of self and identity and heal from any imprints that trauma bonded person left. So again, you can check out the course for 14 days for free down below, all about trauma bonding, healing from it. And I hope you enjoy this channel. Let me know if you want to see more videos about trauma bonds. Hit the thumbs up if you want to see more videos just like this about trauma bonds or coming out of really painful relationship dynamics and how to heal. And let me know any questions you have in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. And I look forward to seeing you in future videos. And please like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying this channel too. Thank you.